The Sony a7 IV came out right at the end of 2025. When I tested it out, it felt like a serious upgrade to the a7 IV, which is a camera that I use pretty much every single day for both photo and video. Everything on this channel is shot on the a7 IV, but how does the a7 V actually compare? Is it a serious upgrade? What are the actual differences? And is it worth looking at if you already own something like the Sony a7 IV? Well, let's dive into what sets these two cameras apart and whether the Sony a7 V is a camera that you should look at upgrading to. Now, first up, you don't really want to be expecting a night and day difference in image quality. Both cameras feature a 33 megapixel sensor, so you'll be seeing the same resolution between both. There are some other factors that affect image quality, but the images themselves do have a very similar feel, whether you're shooting landscape, portrait, really anything at all. It's really once you start using the camera on a day-to-day basis, especially for a mix of different genres, that you start noticing the differences between them. Speed, for example, is a huge one where there's a massive upgrade when it comes to the a7 V. Autofocus feels much more confident with the a7 V. Image stabilization is definitely better. And then, of course, with video, we see some pretty big improvements as well. So let's dive back into image quality to begin with. Now, like I say, very similar feel to the images you'll get from both cameras, same resolution. That means you've got a nice amount of detail to play with. That means you've got the ability to crop. That works with both cameras there. The a7 V does have a slightly higher dynamic range, so you can pull a little bit more back from those images, which is great. And the a7 V is a partially stacked sensor now, so it's a much faster readout. And that means that practically it is significantly different to use for speed. So while the end result, the image quality itself, might feel very similar, the actual process of capturing those images, especially if it is a fast moving subject, so wildlife or indeed sport as well, is going to be very different with the a7 V. The a7 IV was able to shoot up to 10 frames a second, which is actually pretty good, right? That is nice and fast, not bad at all. But the a7 V can shoot all the way up to 30 frames a second, blackout free. Now that's super fast and absolutely perfect for wildlife and sports. And actually for a camera, which is very much an all-rounder, and Sony tend to call this their basic model, that is incredibly quick. Something else which adds onto that is in the a7 V, you now have pre-capture, which is not on the a7 IV. We saw this on the a1 II, for example, and this allows you to start capturing those photos before you even press the shutter. So it's just a constant rolling buffer, which is able to capture things ahead of time, which is just so useful, again, for those fast moving subjects. So when it comes to speed, the a7 V has some big improvements. Now that also feels like the case when it comes to autofocus. This is a big improvement over the a7 IV, right? We've got the tracking significantly more reliable. It's great when paired up with that faster speed, and things like the AI unit integrated into the processor means you get things like human pose recognition, which just helps with those subject recognition, subject tracking as well. So the autofocus here, while absolutely not bad on the a7 IV, is a nice improvement on the a7 V. I mentioned it quickly earlier on, but the image stabilization also feels much better with the a7 V. I actually really like it with the a7 IV. I use the a7 IV handheld all the time. It's actually very, very smooth. But the a7 V has such good image stabilization that I felt completely comfortable walking around with the camera handheld while shooting video, which is something that I would never really do with almost any camera. It is incredibly usable, and it means that shooting handheld is a very, very viable option for all kinds of different things, whether you are shooting as a videographer, maybe a solo videographer on a shoot, or whether you want to shoot with a slower shutter speed later into the day. For example, this photo on the a7 V was taken with a 1 second exposure handheld, and it's still nice and sharp. So most of those cover things like photography, but let's take a look at video as well, because these cameras are absolutely hybrid cameras. And like I say, I use the a7 IV every day for video, right? All the video on this channel is shot in the a7 IV, and that is a great camera for video. I'm able to shoot 4K for a very long time. I have no issues with that. I can shoot 4K 60p. It does have a little bit of a crop, but that's not too bad. And like I say, the image stabilization is good enough that I can shoot handheld most of the time. Now there's that big step up with the image stabilization on the a7 V, but we see some huge upgrades when it comes to video here. 4K 60p no longer has any crop, so that is absolutely full frame again, which is fantastic. And you now have 4K 120 frames a second available as well with an APS-C crop. Because the A7 IV has the AI chip integrated into the processor, we also see things like auto framing, which we've seen on previous cameras, which is so useful if you're a solo videographer. If you're someone who films themselves, and you've just got the camera locked off on a tripod, this is a great way of adding some dynamic movement to your shots. You also have things like 2 heat sinks on the A7 IV, which can absolutely help to improve recording times. Now, that's an issue that hopefully wouldn't come up too often, but I have run into a slight overheating issue here and there with the A7 IV in a hot environment when I'm using the camera for a long time shooting at 4K. So having that additional heatsink on the A7 V means you're just going to get more time and just frankly a better shooting experience. On top of that, you've got a host of other options for pro level video on the A7 V. Things like S-Cinetone, all Intra 422, 10-bit. You can import LUTs into the camera. So things that just set this apart from the A7 IV. This is probably the area where if you really are using the Sony camera, the A7 IV, like I do, as a video camera, this is such a big step up in lots of different ways, both in terms of resolution and frame rate, all the way through to things like the auto framing, the usage of the camera, and those heat sinks as well. So big deal. The actual camera itself looks very similar and feels very similar to the A7 V, but there are some differences here as well. We've got a bigger grip on the A7 V. It feels better in the hands. Now, that's not to say the A7 IV doesn't feel nice, but the A7 V, it just feels a little bit more comfortable. That LCD screen on the back is a little bit bigger as well. It's also 4-axis tilting. So you do get some additional angles you can kind of tilt it to, which is really useful. Something which I love. I love being able to actually move that screen around, not having to use an external monitor when I'm shooting video. You've got things like 2 USB-C ports versus 1 on the A7 IV, and then nice little quality of life things, like for example, a vertical UI when you actually turn the camera, something which you kind of don't even realize you're missing until you start using it. Now, the A7 V is also slightly more power efficient because of that new processor in there, which means it has got slightly better battery life as well. So really, there are significant improvements to the A7 V across the board in pretty much every area outside of just straight up resolution. The question of whether you should upgrade to the A7 V from the A7 IV is a really interesting one. It's a difficult one as well, because the A7 IV is a very capable camera. It's a great all-rounder. I use it all the time. I use it for professional photo work and for all the video work on this channel as well. I'm very happy with it, and it performs exactly the way really that I would like it to perform. But the A7 V is such a nice step up in so many different aspects, especially if you use it as a video camera. There is so much that it can do and so much it can do for you that I think is so useful and just great, especially as a solo videographer. From a photography standpoint, you might not notice as much of a difference from things like landscape or portrait photography, but when it comes to anything to do with speed, this is again a big jump in the way it feels to shoot with this camera. You're getting so much capability out of the A7 V. So if you do any of those different things, I think absolutely this could be a great upgrade. And actually, if you're coming from something like the A7 III, something like that, this is a no-brainer. This is a great camera to go for. Now, if you do want something with a bit more resolution, but still some of these great other qualities, like with the video, the A7R V is absolutely one that is a fantastic option to go for. That's going to give you a lovely bump up in resolution, 61 megapixels. So you've got a huge amount of resolution to play with there, but still with some great qualities when it comes to video, autofocus. You'll be able to get some great stuff there. And then of course, you've got things like the A1 II, if things like speed and frankly, the ultimate sort of video performance is what matters to you. That's really the camera to look at there. But the A7 V, for me, offers the best balance between capability and then price point. It allows you to get real great performance across the board for photo and for video. And for me, this is a significant upgrade from the A7 IV. And especially when you consider something like parkcameras.com, where you can trade in your A7 IV in our used department and absolutely save some money on the A7 V, that is a great way to do that. Now you can check out the A7 V as well as the A7 IV and of course our used department over at parkcameras.com. I will pop links down in the description so you can go and check those out for yourself. I'd love to know, which camera would you be going for? Save a little bit of money and go for the A7 IV, or really get those new improvements and go for the A7 V? Let me know down in the comments because I think that's super interesting. Don't forget to like, subscribe as well, because there's new content all the time. I will see you in the next video, but until then, as always, thanks for watching.